The piece of meat you are looking at was butchered 11 months ago. No refrigerator, no freezer, no vacuum sealer, no electricity at any stage of its storage. It has been sitting inside an Amish farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio, since the first frost of last year, and it is still safe to eat today. The system that preserved it costs less than $60 to build. The Amish have been using it since the 1700s. The USDA documented it in 1923 and called it, and I am quoting the exact phrase, the most effective preservation method available to the American farmer. That document was removed from public circulation in 1957. And the company that benefited from its disappearance is the same company sitting in your kitchen right now, humming quietly at 0.118 cents per kilowatt hour, 24 hours a day, every day of your life. After the last video on the Amish water system, hundreds of you asked the same question: what happens to the food? If the grid goes down, if the freezer dies, if the supply chain breaks, what then? So I went back to Holmes County, and what I found in a stone-lined chamber under a 200-year-old farmhouse changed how I think about every appliance in my own kitchen. The first time I walked into the room, I thought I had stepped into a different century. The stairs went down at a sharp angle, hand-cut into the earth and lined with limestone slabs. The temperature dropped with every step. By the time my feet hit the floor at the bottom, the air around me was 41 degrees. Outside it was 84. The room itself was maybe 12 feet by 14. Stone walls, a packed dirt floor, a single oil lantern hanging from a hook in the ceiling, and lining every wall, wooden shelves, floor to ceiling, holding more food than most American kitchens see in 6 months. Glass jars of canned tomatoes, crocks of fermented sauerkraut, strings of dried apples and pears hanging from the rafters, wheels of hard cheese aging on cedar planks, cured hams hanging from iron hooks, eggs stored in mineral oil, potatoes, onions, beets and turnips buried in dry sand, sausages packed in lard. The Amish farmer who walked me down, his name was Eli, told me his family had not bought a single piece of refrigerated food from a grocery store in 47 years, not because they couldn't, because they didn't need to. I asked him what would happen if the power went out for a week. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "What power?" Here is the number that changes everything. The average American refrigerator-freezer combination consumes between 400 and 800 kilowatt hours of electricity every year. At the current average residential rate of 0.118 per kilowatt hour, that is between 72s and 1,444s per year, every year, for the next 30 years, just to keep food cold. That is between 2,160s and 40,320s over the lifetime of your house, paid to one appliance. And here is what nobody tells you. The appliance itself costs between $1,200 and $4,000 to buy. It lasts roughly 13 years before it dies and ends up in a landfill. The average American home goes through 4 refrigerators in a single lifetime. Total lifetime cost of refrigeration for a single household, somewhere between $7,000 and $20,000. The Amish root cellar costs $60 in materials. It lasts 200 years. That gap, the difference between $60 and $20,000, is not an accident. It was engineered. And the engineering happened in a 12-month period between September 1923 and August 1924, when the General Electric Refrigerator Company launched its first nationwide marketing campaign to convince American households that food storage required electricity. Before that campaign, less than 8% of American homes owned an electric refrigerator. By 1944, that number was 85%. In one generation, an industry that did not exist became a household necessity, and a 5,000-year-old preservation system was rebranded as a relic. But the Amish, who had no advertising agency, no marketing budget, and no interest in what the rest of the country thought, kept doing what worked. Their food never spoiled, their families never went hungry. Their electricity bill, then and now, stayed at zero. Here is what is actually happening inside an Amish root cellar. 6 feet below the surface of the earth, the ground temperature stays constant year-round. In Ohio, it sits at 54 to 56 degrees. In Pennsylvania, 52 to 55. In northern Minnesota, 42 to 45. In Texas Hill Country, 64 to 67. It does not matter what the weather is doing above. 6 feet down, the temperature is locked. When you build a chamber into the ground, surrounded by stone, with a single vented entry point, that chamber inherits the surrounding Earth's temperature. The stone walls act as thermal mass. They absorb and release heat so slowly that the room temperature inside barely fluctuates more than 3 degrees in any given month. The packed dirt floor allows moisture to wick naturally in and out of the room, keeping humidity between 80 and 95%, which is exactly the range that prevents most stored produce from drying out or rotting. A single ventilation pipe at the top of the chamber lets warm air rise and escape. A second pipe at the bottom draws cool air in. This creates a slow, continuous convection current that exchanges the air in the room every 12 hours without any fan, motor, or moving part. Temperature, stable. Humidity, ideal. Air exchange, automatic. Energy use, 0. That is the entire system. Earth, stone, gravity, and physics. The same system the Romans used to store grain through Mediterranean summers. The same system English country estates used to keep dairy and meat through the 1800s. The same system Russian farmers used to survive Siberian winters. The same system Korean families have used for 3,000 years to ferment and store kimchi in clay vessels buried in the earth. The technology is older than civilization itself, and it is sitting underneath the foundation of every house in America right now, doing absolutely nothing, because somebody convinced you that food storage required a $2,000 box and a monthly utility bill. So how did the knowledge disappear? In 1923, the United States Department of Agriculture published a document titled Farmer's Bulletin Number 1399, Storage of Vegetables in Root Cellars. It was 47 pages long. It detailed the exact dimensions, ventilation requirements, humidity controls, and shelf layouts for an effective root cellar. It included specific instructions for 23 different crops, recommended storage times of 6 to 12 months, and noted that no electrical apparatus is required for the proper functioning of such a chamber. That document was the official position of the U.S. government on food storage. In 1924, General Electric launched the Monitor Top, the first mass-market electric refrigerator. It cost $300. The average American family income at the time was $1,400 per year. The refrigerator cost 21% of a family's annual income, a deliberate luxury purchase designed to establish electric refrigeration as a status symbol. By 1930, GE had spent the equivalent of $400 million in today's dollars on a marketing campaign that did 3 things. It associated refrigeration with cleanliness, modernity, and safety. It associated root cellars with disease, primitiveness, and poverty, and it lobbied the USDA to revise its farmer education programs to emphasize electrical solutions. By 1947, Farmer's Bulletin Number 1399 was officially out of print. By 1957, it was removed from the USDA reference library catalog entirely. A new bulletin replaced it, one that focused on home freezing and recommended the purchase of a chest freezer as the optimal preservation method for the modern American household. The chest freezer, of course, was sold by General Electric. This is not a conspiracy, it is on the public record. The USDA's own historical archives still contain the original 1923 bulletin, if you know where to look. I had to file a public records request to get a digitized copy. 2 years before this video was published, the document had been viewed by 14 people total since its digitization in 2009. 14. A 47-page government document that explained how to feed a family for 12 months without electricity had been read by fewer people than the number of people watching this video right now. Before I show you the exact blueprint for building a root cellar on your own property, the dimensions, the materials, the legal permits, and the variant for people who don't have land to dig, I want to point you somewhere, because the question I get more than any other is this: where do I find all of this in one place? The cooling system, the water system, the heating system, the food preservation system, every Amish method with exact materials, exact dimensions, and exact steps for a house I already own. I put it together. It is called the Kept Quiet Home System. The link is in the description, but stay here, because what I am about to show you in the next 4 minutes is the variant that works even if you live in a townhouse, an apartment, or a property with no yard. A woman in Vermont built a working version of this system in a 4-foot by 6-foot closet inside her own house, and she has not bought refrigerated produce in 3 years. Here is exactly how you do it. There are 3 versions of this system. Pick the one that matches your property. Version 1, the traditional root cellar. If you have land, this is the version that lasts 200 years. You dig a chamber 8 feet deep into a hillside or below your house. The minimum size for a functional cellar is 6 feet by 8 feet, enough to store food for a family of 4 through an entire year. You line the walls with stone, concrete block, or poured concrete. The floor stays packed earth. You install 2 ventilation pipes, one at the top, one at the bottom, with simple screened caps to keep out rodents. The door faces north if possible, to minimize summer heat entry. You install a heavy wooden or insulated door with a tight seal. Total materials cost for a self-built unit, $400 to $800. If you have a tractor or a friend with one, you can build it in a single weekend. If you're digging by hand, give yourself 2 weekends. This is the version the Amish use. Version 2, the basement cellar. If you already have a basement, you already have most of what you need. You build a stud wall to partition off a corner of your basement, ideally on the north side, against the foundation wall. The foundation wall is your thermal mass. It stays cool year-round because it is in direct contact with the earth. You insulate the wall facing the rest of the basement to keep heated air out. You install the same 2-pipe ventilation system that drops cool outside air in and lets warm air escape. You build wooden shelves along the cold walls. Total materials cost $150 to $300. Build time, 1 weekend. This version stays between 45 and 60 degrees in most climates. It will not store food as long as a true root cellar, but it will keep produce fresh for 4 to 7 months without a single watt of electricity. Version 3, the Vermont closet system. This is the variant for people with no basement, no yard, and no ability to dig. The woman in Vermont I mentioned earlier converted a north-facing closet in her unheated mudroom into a functional cold storage chamber. She installed a small vent to the outside wall, a 4-inch hole with a screened cap. She built shelves. She added a thermometer and a hygrometer. Total materials cost $60. The closet stays between 38 and 52 degrees from October through April, depending on outdoor temperature. She stores apples, potatoes, carrots, onions, hard squash, cabbage, and home canned goods. Through the summer months, when outdoor temperatures rise, she shifts to canning, drying, and fermenting, preservation methods that don't require cold storage at all. She estimates her annual savings between reduced grocery bills and 0 refrigerator electricity for 6 months a year at roughly $900. That is the entire range: a 200-year stone chamber, a basement partition, or a $60 closet. Pick the one that fits your property, and you have eliminated the largest electrical appliance in your house. Here is what I keep thinking about. The Romans stored grain in earthen chambers through 100-degree Mediterranean summers and fed entire armies on it. The Russians stored cabbage and root vegetables through winters that killed exposed cattle in the field. The Koreans buried fermented vegetables in clay vessels and let the earth do the work for 3,000 years. Every civilization that survived long enough to write its history figured out the same thing. The earth is the original refrigerator. It runs forever. It costs nothing. It works in every climate, on every continent, in every century. The Amish never forgot. In 1923, the United States government documented it. In 1924, General Electric started selling against it. In 1957, the document disappeared. And in the 80 years since, an entire generation of Americans has come to believe that food storage requires a corporation, a power grid, and a monthly bill that never stops arriving. But the ground under your house does not need a power grid. The stone in your basement does not need a marketing budget. The closet in your mudroom does not need permission from any company to do exactly what the earth has been doing under every farm in the world for 10,000 years. You were never supposed to know it was that simple. Now you do. Drop your state in the comments and tell me one thing. Do you have a basement, a hillside on your property, or a north-facing closet? Because the answer to that question determines which version of this system you can build, and I read every comment. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next. Because next week I am going to show you the Amish bread system that lasts 30 days at room temperature without preservatives, refrigeration, or freezing. And the 1962 internal memo from a major flour company that proves they knew about it and chose to bury it. The knowledge was never lost.